Marcus Williams had always believed that the world worked in strange ways. He was born in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, a place where opportunity seemed as distant as the stars. Growing up, his parents did their best to provide for him and his younger siblings, but they lived modestly. His father worked long hours as a truck driver, while his mother, a school teacher, spent her evenings helping students with their homework. Despite their tireless work, they could never afford the luxuries of others. Still, they had love and resilience, and that was enough. Marcus, from a young age, learned the importance of hard work. His parents instilled in him the belief that with dedication and perseverance, anyone could achieve success, no matter their background. But as Marcus grew older, he began to realize that not everyone was afforded the same opportunities. In fact, many people were born into systems that worked against them, systems that made success feel like an unattainable dream. By the time Marcus was a teenager, he knew he wanted more for himself. He wasn't content with a life of mediocrity, where dreams were limited by one's circumstances. He watched the successful people in his neighborhood, the businessmen, the doctors, the lawyers, and he dreamed of joining their ranks. But for people like him, it wasn't easy. In school, Marcus was often overlooked. His teachers saw him as just another student, and his peers sometimes dismissed him because of his race or background. Yet Marcus always did his best to push through, constantly striving to be the best he could be. After graduating high school, Marcus knew that college was his next step. However, without financial support from his family, he was forced to take on multiple jobs just to pay for tuition. He worked at fast food restaurants, in retail, and eventually at an upscale restaurant downtown. This was where he learned the real value of hard work. The restaurant where Marcus worked was one of the finest in the city, frequented by celebrities, business tycoons, and politicians. The staff was trained to cater to the elite, providing impeccable service at all times. Marcus, though, was a humble young man. He never quite fit in with the highbrow customers or the wealthier members of the waitstaff. He was treated as just another worker, and he could feel it in the way he was often dismissed by his colleagues and the patrons alike. Marcus spent his days running food, refilling drinks, and making small talk with guests, most of whom didn't even acknowledge his presence. He did his job well, always striving to go above and beyond, but it was clear that his efforts were overlooked. It was as if he were invisible, like no one truly saw him for who he was or what he could achieve. And though he continued to do his job with dignity, he couldn't help but feel the sting of being underestimated. One particular evening, as he was serving drinks to a table of well-dressed businessmen, a man from the group made a comment that stuck with him. The man looked at Marcus, paused for a moment, and then said, "I hope you didn't take someone's spot here, boy. This is a place for people who've earned their right to sit." The comment was casual, made in the midst of the group's laughter, but it felt like a slap to Marcus's face. He stood there for a moment, frozen, feeling the sting of humiliation. He had heard comments like this before, but this one felt different. This was a man who didn't even care to hide his disdain. For a moment, Marcus wanted to lash out, to yell at the man and tell him off. But he knew better. He had learned early on that anger wouldn't get him anywhere. He simply nodded, gave a polite smile, and walked away, carrying the weight of the insult with him for the rest of the night. That evening, Marcus went home feeling more defeated than usual. As he sat on the edge of his bed, he thought about his life. He had been working tirelessly, sacrificing his time and energy, just to get by. He had dreams, big ones, but they seemed so far out of reach. How was he supposed to achieve anything when the world continued to tell him he wasn't good enough? Marcus stared out the window into the night sky, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. He thought about his family, how hard they had worked to give him a chance at something better. He thought about his mother, who always told him that the only thing that could stop him was his own doubt. And yet, here he was, drowning in doubt, surrounded by walls that seemed impossible to break down. But in that moment, something shifted inside Marcus. He refused to let this be the end of his story. He refused to let the prejudices and limitations that had been placed upon him define his future. Marcus knew that if he wanted to achieve something greater, he had to stop waiting for permission. He had to create his own path. The next day, as he walked into the restaurant for his shift, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for people to see his worth. He was going to prove it to them. He wasn't going to be just another waiter. He was going to be someone who would change the game, someone who would build his own legacy. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and resilience. But he was ready. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt the fire of ambition burning inside him again. The days that followed weren't easy. Marcus had made his decision, but the road ahead was filled with challenges. As he arrived at work every day, he couldn't shake off the feeling that the restaurant, though glamorous and filled with prestigious clientele, was a symbol of the barriers that stood in his way. Every shift, every interaction, reminded him of how invisible he felt in this world. But he no longer allowed it to get to him in the same way. His perspective had shifted. He was no longer just going through the motions. He was moving with purpose, determined to build the life he had always dreamed of. The first step, he knew, was learning. He couldn't afford to stay stuck, and he couldn't rely on the same old routines if he wanted to break through the barriers that had been set for him. Marcus began reading business books during his breaks, scouring the internet for free courses, and even reaching out to mentors he admired. He wanted to understand what made successful people tick, what set them apart, and how they overcame the challenges they faced. Every day he made it a point to learn something new. He didn't just want to be a waiter anymore. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to be a business owner, someone who controlled his destiny, not someone whose worth was dictated by the whims of wealthy patrons and discriminatory employers. One evening, while serving a table of regulars, he overheard a conversation that would change his life forever. It was between two men who were seated at one of the restaurant's most coveted tables. Marcus had served them countless times, but tonight, the conversation seemed different. One of the men was discussing his business ventures, talking about expanding his empire, and sharing his plans for the future. He spoke with such ease, such confidence, that Marcus couldn't help but listen in, even though he wasn't supposed to. The man's name was Jordan Williams, and he wasn't just another businessman. He was a black entrepreneur who had built a successful chain of restaurants from the ground up. His story resonated with Marcus in a way that no other success story ever had. Jordan's rise was not just about making money. It was about defying the odds, breaking through the ceilings that had been put in place to hold him back. Marcus could feel the passion and drive in his voice, and for the first time in a long while, he saw someone who looked like him in a position of power and influence. Jordan had faced the same struggles, the same prejudice, and yet he had made it. He had proven that success wasn't just for the privileged or the elite. It was for anyone who was willing to work hard, who had the vision to see beyond the obstacles. Marcus knew in that moment that he wasn't alone, that there was a path forward, a way to break free from the limitations that had been imposed on him. After finishing his shift, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the conversation he had overheard. He had always felt like he was at the mercy of the people around him, his bosses, his coworkers, his customers. But now, something had clicked. He realized that he didn't have to wait for someone to give him permission to succeed. He could take control. He could make his own opportunities. And the best part was he had the drive, the knowledge, and the support to do it. The next day, Marcus mustered up the courage to approach Jordan after his meal. It wasn't easy. He had never been the type to approach strangers, let alone someone as successful as Jordan. but something inside him pushed him forward. He needed to seize this moment. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams," Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. "I just wanted to thank you for inspiring me. I overheard your conversation last night, and I want to learn from you. I have dreams of starting my own business, but I don't know where to begin. Do you think you could help me?" Jordan looked up from his meal, surprised at first, but then smiled warmly. "You overheard, huh? Well, that's one way to get an introduction." He chuckled softly before continuing. "I don't normally do this, but I see something in you. You've got the drive, I can tell. You remind me of myself when I was starting out. Okay, here's the deal. I'll mentor you. I'll help you get started. But you have to be ready to put in the work. It's not going to be easy, and it won't happen overnight." Marcus's heart raced. He had never imagined that someone like Jordan, someone who had made it, would take the time to mentor him. But here he was, offering him a chance to learn and grow. "Thank you. I won't let you down," Marcus replied, feeling a sense of hope he hadn't felt in years. From that moment on, Jordan became Marcus's mentor, guiding him through the ins and outs of entrepreneurship. Marcus learned about the importance of networking, how to manage finances, and how to build a business from the ground up. He didn't just learn about business theory. He learned practical, real-world skills that would set him apart from others who had simply read books or taken online courses. He learned how to pitch his ideas, how to find investors, and how to deal with rejection. But perhaps more importantly, Marcus learned the importance of resilience. Jordan taught him that success wasn't just about making the right moves. It was about bouncing back from failure, about pushing through the hard times, and about believing in yourself when everyone else doubted you. It wasn't long before Marcus began to see results. He took Jordan's advice to heart and started working on his first business idea, a small delivery service that focused on catering to local restaurants. First, the business was slow. He struggled to gain traction, and many of the restaurant owners he approached turned him down, dismissing him as just another delivery guy. But Marcus didn't give up. He kept going, refining his business plan, improving his customer service, and learning from every failure. One day, after months of hard work, Marcus secured his first major contract. A small but popular restaurant agreed to partner with him, offering him the chance to deliver food to their customers. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was a start, a sign that his efforts were finally paying off. Marcus worked tirelessly, ensuring that every delivery was made on time and with a level of service that exceeded expectations. Slowly but surely, word spread about his business, and he began to gain more clients. But success didn't come without its setbacks. Marcus faced challenges from every angle: rising costs, tough competition, and the constant pressure to keep improving. But he kept going, fueled by the belief that he was building something real, something that could change his life and the lives of those around him. As his business grew, so did his confidence. Marcus began to see himself not as just a waiter, but as an entrepreneur, someone who was capable of making his dreams a reality. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was on the right path. And with every step, he knew he was getting closer to the life he had always dreamed of. As Marcus's delivery service grew, so did the challenges. What had started as a small, local operation was quickly evolving into something much bigger. He found himself constantly working, often 16-hour days, managing logistics, coordinating with restaurants, and trying to meet the demands of an increasingly expanding client base. Though the progress was exciting, it came with its own set of hurdles. One of the most significant challenges Marcus faced was scaling his business. At first, he had handled everything himself, picking up the food, making deliveries, and handling customer service. But as more restaurants signed on, it became clear that he couldn't continue to do everything on his own. He needed a team. He decided to hire a few drivers, but hiring wasn't as simple as he had hoped. He didn't have the financial cushion to offer competitive wages, so he had to rely on people who were just as hungry for success as he was, people who believed in the business, even if they weren't being paid top dollar. His first hire was a young woman named Liza, a college student who was trying to save up for her tuition. She didn't have much experience, but she had drive, and that was all Marcus needed. With Liza on board, Marcus was able to streamline operations a little more. He could focus on the logistics while she handled deliveries, but the growth of the business quickly revealed another set of problems. There were miscommunications with customers, delays in deliveries, and, of course, the ever-present issue of competition. Larger, more established delivery services started taking notice of Marcus's operation. They offered restaurants lower prices and better deals, hoping to lure them away from his service. The pressure was mounting, but Marcus was determined. He couldn't afford to lose clients, especially not now. This was his chance to prove that he could make it. He had no intention of letting a larger company take over the market he had worked so hard to build. He needed to find a way to stand out, to differentiate himself from the corporate giants who could undercut him with their resources. Marcus sat down one evening with his laptop, scrolling through the reviews and feedback his clients had left. It was clear that his customers appreciated his personal touch. They liked the reliability, the fact that Marcus was always available to answer questions and resolve issues. That was his edge. But how could he leverage this to stay competitive? Then it hit him. He wasn't just running a delivery service, he was running a service that built relationships. What if he took that relationship building to the next level? Instead of just being a faceless delivery company, Marcus decided to turn his service into a personalized experience. He began offering specialized services, such as customized meal deliveries, personalized thank you notes for each customer, and even a loyalty program for regular clients. He wanted his customers to feel like they were part of something special, something different from the bigger companies that treated them as mere numbers. Marcus also made it a point to connect with his drivers. He held regular meetings with them, seeking their input and fostering a sense of community within the company. He knew that the success of his business wasn't just about the food. It was about the people he worked with, the relationships he nurtured, and the culture he built. But even with his new approach, there were still moments of doubt. There were days when he felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work, when he doubted whether he could truly succeed. His savings were running thin, and the competition was relentless. At times, it seemed like the odds were stacked against him. But Marcus refused to give up. He had worked too hard to let it all slip away now. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Marcus received a phone call from Jordan. It had been a while since they had spoken. Marcus had been so busy with the business that he hadn't had much time to connect with his mentor. "Hey Marcus, how's it going?" Jordan's voice was warm and reassuring. "I'm hanging in there," Marcus replied, though he couldn't hide the fatigue in his voice. "The business is growing, but it's been a struggle. I'm dealing with competition, and honestly, there are days when I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up." Jordan was silent for a moment before responding. "I know it feels like everything is falling apart, but trust me, you're on the right path. Every successful entrepreneur has been where you are right now. What you're doing is hard, but it's worth it. Don't stop. You've built something from nothing, and that's something most people will never understand. You have to keep pushing forward, even when it feels like it's not enough." Marcus listened to Jordan's words, letting them sink in. "Thanks, Jordan. I needed to hear that." "No problem. Just remember, failure isn't the end. It's part of the journey. Keep moving forward. You've got this." That conversation reignited a fire inside Marcus. He had been so focused on the day-to-day struggles that he had lost sight of why he started in the first place. He wasn't just building a business. He was building something that mattered, something that could change lives. The next day, Marcus woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he had to make some changes to keep the business moving forward, but he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. It was time to bring in more people who shared his vision. He started networking with local business owners, looking for opportunities to partner with restaurants and other small businesses that were also struggling to keep up with the larger competitors. He offered them personalized services, just as he had with his customers. Slowly but surely, his efforts began to pay off. 1 month later, Marcus secured a partnership with a large chain of restaurants that had been hesitant to work with smaller companies like his. But with his persistence and the relationships he had built, he convinced them that his service was worth the investment. It was a huge win, one that solidified his reputation as a reliable and trustworthy partner in the industry. As his business grew, Marcus continued to expand his team. He hired more drivers, office staff, and customer service representatives. With each new hire, he made sure they shared his commitment to providing exceptional service and building lasting relationships. He was no longer just a one-man operation. He was a business owner, a leader, and a mentor. But even as his business expanded, Marcus never forgot where he came from. He remembered the struggles, the rejections, and the doubts, and he made sure to give back. He started a scholarship program for young people in his neighborhood who wanted to start their own businesses. He also began offering mentorship to aspiring entrepreneurs, sharing his story and the lessons he had learned along the way. As the years passed, Marcus's business became one of the most successful delivery services in the region. His commitment to personalized service, community building, and resilience set him apart from the competition. He had gone from a young man working as a waiter, struggling to make ends meet, to a successful entrepreneur with a thriving business. And yet, Marcus knew that his journey was far from over. He had built something incredible, but he still had a long way to go. There were new challenges ahead, but he was ready for them. He had learned that success wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about learning from it and using it to fuel your growth. Marcus had risen above the obstacles, and he was determined to keep rising higher. As Marcus's delivery service continued to grow, so did his responsibilities. The business was thriving, but it wasn't without its complexities. Now, with a larger team, a greater number of clients, and a business model that demanded constant innovation, Marcus had to step up in ways he hadn't imagined. The stakes were higher, the expectations were greater, and the pressure to keep everything running smoothly was relentless. One afternoon, Marcus sat in his office, the glow of his computer screen illuminating his face as he went over the company's financials. The numbers were promising, but they didn't tell the full story. His employees had been working hard, and he was proud of their dedication, but he knew he needed to give them more than just jobs, more than just a paycheck. He wanted them to feel as if they were part of something bigger, something that mattered. At the same time, Marcus began to think about his long-term vision. This wasn't just a business he was running. This was his legacy, his chance to leave an impact on the world. He had already achieved more than he had ever expected, but there was still so much he wanted to do. He wanted to grow beyond the food delivery service. He wanted to build something that could truly transform his community. That's when he had the idea. Marcus had spent years watching his community struggle. He saw the lack of opportunities, the high unemployment rates, and the barriers that people from his neighborhood faced when trying to start their own businesses. He knew that the reason so many people failed was not because they lacked talent or ambition, but because they didn't have the resources or guidance to succeed. Many of them, just like him, had big dreams but no clear path to achieving them. So, Marcus decided to build a program that could give back in a way that would provide long-lasting benefits. He wanted to offer business training, mentorship, and even seed funding to aspiring entrepreneurs in his community. His goal wasn't just to help them succeed in business, it was to create a network of support, a foundation that could help lift the entire community. He called it the Rising Above Initiative, a program designed to provide mentorship, funding, and resources to young entrepreneurs who had the vision but lacked the means to make it a reality. Marcus knew that in order to break the cycle of poverty and inequality, it was essential to give people the tools they needed to create their own opportunities. But creating the program wasn't easy. It required an investment of time, money, and effort. Marcus didn't have all the answers, and he didn't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect moment. He had to make it happen, and he had to make it happen fast. He began by reaching out to his network of investors, business partners, and mentors. With their support, he was able to secure the initial funding for the program. The first step was finding the right people. Marcus knew that there were many talented individuals in his community who had the potential to be successful entrepreneurs, but they just needed the right guidance. He reached out to local schools, community centers, and even his own employees, asking them to nominate individuals who had the drive and determination to succeed but lacked the resources to get started. To his surprise, the response was overwhelming. There were so many people eager to learn, to grow, and to break free from the limitations they had been given. Marcus carefully selected the first group of ments, and they quickly got to work. He offered them training in business management, marketing, and financial planning. He brought in experts to teach them how to secure funding, how to network, and how to develop their business ideas into viable, sustainable companies. The initiative was a success from the start. In just a few months, several of the ments had launched their own businesses, from small cafes to tech startups. Marcus watched in awe as his community began to change. He had given them the tools they needed, but it was their determination and drive that made all the difference. As the program grew, Marcus expanded it to other cities, creating a network of young entrepreneurs who supported and mentored each other. He didn't want to just create successful businesses. He wanted to create a culture of entrepreneurship, a movement that would empower others to rise above the limitations they had been given. But success came with its own set of challenges. As his initiative gained momentum, Marcus found himself spread thin. There was always something new to tackle, whether it was managing his own growing business or ensuring that the initiative was running smoothly. The pressure weighed heavily on him, and there were days when he wondered if he was doing enough. One evening, after a long day of meetings and phone calls, Marcus sat in his office, exhausted. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the walls filled with photographs of his journey. From the day he started his business to the moments when he'd helped others take the first steps toward their own success. He had come a long way, but the work was far from over. As he sat there, he remembered something Jordan had told him during their early conversations. Success isn't about the destination. It's about the journey. It's about the lives you change along the way. Those words echoed in Marcus's mind as he realized that, despite the challenges, he was doing exactly what he had set out to do. He wasn't just building a business. He was building a legacy, one that would continue to impact people long after he was gone. Marcus leaned forward, his fingers tapping the desk as he began to plan for the next phase of his initiative. He wanted to create scholarships for young entrepreneurs who wanted to attend college but couldn't afford it. He wanted to partner with large corporations to create job opportunities for his ments. He wanted to expand his business even further, hiring more people from his community and giving them the same opportunities he had fought for. The future was bright, and Marcus knew that he was just getting started. His journey had taken him from working as a waiter in an upscale restaurant to running a successful business and creating a program that was changing lives. But he wasn't done yet. There was still so much to be done. And with every step forward, Marcus felt more confident that he could overcome any obstacle that stood in his way. As the years went by, Marcus's influence continued to grow. He became a sought-after speaker at entrepreneurship conferences, sharing his story and inspiring others to follow in his footsteps. He was invited to speak at schools, universities, and business events, where he encouraged young people to believe in themselves and take risks. His message was clear. No matter where you come from, no matter what obstacles you face, you can rise above it. And as the final chapter of his story began to unfold, Marcus looked back on his journey with pride. He had faced adversity, fought against the odds, and built something meaningful, not just for himself, but for his entire community. And in the end, he knew that this was just the beginning.